Subscribe to our channel for more gripping corporate tales and leadership insights. I walked into the conference room, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The air felt thick with tension, and the long mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My colleagues sat in their usual spots, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. I took my seat near the end, trying to steady my breathing. The boss, Mr. Hargrove, stood at the head, his expression unreadable. I'd been with the company for 8 years, climbing the ranks with sweat and late nights. Today's meeting was supposed to be routine, just another quarterly review. But something about Hargrove's stiff posture told me otherwise. I adjusted my tie, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Rumors had been swirling for weeks about restructuring. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the agenda in front of me. Still, a nagging unease settled in my gut. Hargrove cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. He began with the usual pleasantries, but his tone was clipped. I braced myself for what was coming next. "We're making some changes," Hargrove announced, his voice cutting through the room. My stomach dropped as he continued, his words deliberate and cold. "Effective immediately, some roles will be adjusted to align with our new direction." I felt a chill run down my spine as he scanned the room. His eyes landed on me, and my heart sank. "James, you'll be stepping down from your role as senior manager." The words hit like a sledgehammer, knocking the air out of me. Demoted. After years of driving results, mentoring teams, and exceeding targets, I stared at him, disbelief clouding my thoughts. The room seemed to shrink, my colleagues' faces blurring around me. Hargrove moved on, discussing other changes, but I barely heard him. My mind raced. Why me? I'd given everything to this company. I glanced at my notepad, my carefully prepared notes now meaningless. The demotion felt like a betrayal, a public humiliation. I clenched my fists under the table, fighting to stay composed. The meeting dragged on, but I was lost in a fog of anger and confusion. Hargrove's reasoning was vague, something about streamlining leadership. It didn't add up. My performance reviews had always been stellar. I thought of the late nights, the weekends sacrificed, the deals I'd closed. My team had consistently outperformed others, yet here I was, singled out. I scanned the faces around me, searching for allies, but most avoided my gaze. A few offered sympathetic glances, but they were fleeting. I felt exposed, like a boxer left defenseless in the ring. Hargrove's voice droned on, detailing new reporting structures. I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept circling back to the demotion. What had I missed? Was this personal? I replayed recent interactions, searching for clues. Nothing stood out, yet the decision was final. I felt my confidence unraveling, thread by thread. The room felt hotter, my collar tighter. I needed to regain control. But how? Just as I thought the worst was over, the CEO, Ms. Caldwell, entered the room. Her presence was commanding, her tailored suit a stark contrast to Hargrove's rumpled demeanor. She rarely attended these meetings, so her arrival sent a ripple of surprise through the room. She nodded at Hargrove, who stepped aside, and took his place at the head. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm but firm. I straightened in my seat, trying to mask my turmoil. She glanced at her notes, then looked directly at me. "James, I'd like you to present your strategy for the Q4 rollout." My heart stopped. Present. Now. After being demoted in front of everyone, I felt every pair of eyes turn to me, waiting. My mouth went dry, and my notes felt like a foreign language. Was this a test, or a cruel twist of fate? I had to pull myself together. Fast. I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to the front of the room. My strategy was one I'd spent weeks refining, but now it felt like a relic of a different life. I cleared my throat, forcing a confident tone. "Thank you, Ms. Caldwell," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. I clicked on the projector, and my slides appeared, crisp and professional. I launched into the overview, outlining market trends and our competitive edge. The room was silent, but I could feel Hargrove's stare burning into me. I focused on Caldwell, who watched with an unreadable expression. My demotion loomed in my mind, but I pushed it aside. This was my chance to prove I wasn't defined by a title. I detailed our growth targets, backed by data I'd painstakingly gathered. My voice grew stronger with each slide. I wasn't just presenting, I was fighting for my place. The room felt less hostile now, or maybe I was just too focused to care. As I moved to the financial projections, I noticed Caldwell nodding slightly. Was it approval, or just politeness? I couldn't tell, but it spurred me on. I outlined cost-saving measures I'd proposed months ago, ones Hargrove had dismissed. Now they felt like a lifeline, a way to reclaim my credibility. I spoke with conviction, drawing on every ounce of expertise I'd built over the years. My demotion still stung, but I refused to let it define this moment. I glanced at my colleagues, some were taking notes, others leaned forward. Even Hargrove seemed less smug, though his arms were crossed tightly. I transitioned to the implementation timeline, my confidence building. This was my strategy, my vision, and I owned it. Caldwell's eyes stayed locked on me, and I sensed an opportunity. If I could impress her, maybe I could turn this disaster around. I wrapped up the section, pausing for questions. The silence felt heavy, but I stood tall. Caldwell raised a hand, and my pulse quickened. "James, your cost projections, how did you calculate the savings?" she asked. Her tone wasn't accusing, just curious, but I felt the weight of the question. I walked her through my methodology, citing industry benchmarks and internal data. She nodded, scribbling something in her notebook. I exhaled silently, relieved I'd anticipated this. Another colleague asked about scalability, and I answered with ease, drawing on case studies I'd researched. The room felt alive now, engaged in a way it hadn't been earlier. Hargrove shifted in his seat, his discomfort palpable. I didn't dare look at him too long. I needed to stay focused. Caldwell's questions kept coming, each one sharp but fair. I answered them all, my confidence growing with each response. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a chance to rewrite the narrative. I wasn't the demoted manager, I was the one with answers. As I neared the end of my presentation, I felt a shift in the room's energy. Colleagues who'd avoided my gaze earlier were now nodding, some even smiling. Caldwell's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail. I outlined the final steps: partnerships, marketing, and risk mitigation. Each point was backed by data, each argument airtight. I'd poured my heart into this strategy, and it showed. I glanced at Hargrove, whose face was a mask of restraint. Did he regret his decision? I couldn't tell, but I didn't care. This moment was mine. I concluded with a call to action, urging the team to align behind the vision. "This strategy isn't just numbers, it's our future," I said, my voice firm. The room erupted in polite applause, but Caldwell's nod felt like the real victory. I returned to my seat, adrenaline still coursing through me. Hargrove took the floor again, but his earlier confidence seemed shaken. He stumbled through a few points, his usual swagger gone. I sat back, my mind racing with possibilities. Caldwell's request had blindsided me, but it had also given me a platform. My demotion still stung, but I'd just proven my worth in front of the CEO. What did it mean? Was she testing me, or had she seen something Hargrove hadn't? I replayed her questions in my mind, searching for hidden meaning. My colleagues whispered among themselves, and I caught fragments of praise. "Strong presentation," one said. "He nailed it," another muttered. I allowed myself a small smile, but the uncertainty lingered. What happened next was anyone's guess. Hargrove wrapped up the meeting, his voice flat. As we filed out, Caldwell caught my eye and gave a slight nod. My heart leapt. Was this a lifeline? Outside the conference room, colleagues approached me, offering quiet congratulations. "You killed it in there," one said, clapping my shoulder. I thanked them, but my mind was elsewhere. The demotion still felt raw, like a wound that wouldn't close. I headed to my office, needing space to process. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the framed photo of my team from last year's retreat. We'd been unstoppable then. What had changed? I opened my laptop, pulling up the org chart. My new role wasn't even listed yet, a glaring reminder of my fall. But Caldwell's request kept nagging at me. Why ask me to present? Was it a chance to redeem myself, or just a formality? I jotted down notes, trying to piece it together. The strategy I'd presented was bold, ambitious, everything I stood for. Maybe Caldwell saw that. Maybe there was still a way forward. The rest of the day passed in a blur of emails and routine tasks. My demotion was the talk of the office, whispered in hallways and break rooms. I kept my head down, focusing on work to drown out the noise. But every glance from a colleague felt like a judgment. I replayed the meeting in my mind, dissecting every moment. Hargrove's cold delivery, Caldwell's unexpected request, it all felt like a chess game I didn't fully understand. I wondered if Hargrove had pushed for my demotion to protect his own position. He'd always been territorial, quick to claim credit but slow to share it. I'd seen him sideline others before, but I never thought I'd be next. My strategy presentation had thrown a wrench in his narrative, though. Caldwell's attention had shifted to me, and that had to mean something. I needed to talk to her, but how? A direct approach felt risky. I decided to bide my time, watching for an opening. That evening, I stayed late, poring over my strategy again. The numbers were solid, the plan actionable. I'd built it to withstand scrutiny, and it had held up today. But the demotion gnawed at me. Why hadn't Hargrove consulted me first? I opened my performance reviews, scanning for anything I'd missed. Every metric screamed success. Revenue up, team morale high, client satisfaction through the roof. The demotion made no sense, unless it was personal. I thought of Hargrove's recent tension, his clipped responses in our one-on-ones. Had I challenged him too much? My strategy had pushed for bold changes, some that stepped on his toes. Maybe that was it. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Caldwell's nod kept flashing in my mind. She'd seen something in me, potential, maybe. I needed to leverage that, but carefully. A wrong move could bury me deeper. The next morning, I arrived early, determined to reclaim my footing. The office was quiet, the hum of computers the only sound. I drafted an email to Caldwell, thanking her for the opportunity to present. I kept it professional, hinting at my passion for the company's future. Before sending, I hesitated. Too forward? No, I had to take the risk. I hit send, my heart racing. Minutes later, a reply popped up. Appreciated, James. Let's discuss soon. My pulse quickened. A meeting with the CEO was a rare chance, one I couldn't waste. I spent the day preparing, refining my talking points. I needed to address the demotion without sounding bitter. My strategy was my strongest card, data-driven, forward-thinking, and proven. If I could align it with Caldwell's vision, maybe I could turn this around. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, but I felt like I was playing a different game. Hargrove called me into his office that afternoon, his face a mask of forced civility. "Good presentation yesterday," he said, but his tone was flat. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. He leaned back, studying me. "Your new role will give you more time to focus on execution," he added, as if I'd asked for it. I wanted to push back, to demand answers, but I held my tongue. Antagonizing him now would only hurt me. Instead, I thanked him and left, my mind racing. His words felt like a script, rehearsed and hollow. I wondered if Caldwell's presence had rattled him. She'd put me on the spot, and I'd delivered, maybe too well. Back at my desk, I checked my calendar. Caldwell's assistant had scheduled a one-on-one for tomorrow. My chance was coming, and I had to be ready. I started outlining my pitch, every word deliberate. That night, I couldn't sleep, my mind churning with scenarios. What if Caldwell was testing my resilience? What if she saw my demotion as a mistake? I replayed my presentation, analyzing her reactions. Her questions had been sharp but engaged, not dismissive. I felt a spark of hope. My strategy wasn't just numbers, it was a vision for growth, one I believed in. If I could convince her, maybe I could bypass Hargrove entirely. But the risks were high. Going over his head could backfire, painting me as disloyal. I needed to frame it as collaboration, not rebellion. I jotted down key points: align with company goals, emphasize results, stay humble. The demotion had shaken me, but it had also lit a fire. I wasn't done fighting. By dawn, I had a plan, polished and ready. Caldwell's meeting was my shot to change the game. The meeting with Caldwell was set for 10 a.m. in her corner office. I arrived early, my notes in hand, my suit pressed. Her assistant waved me in, and I found Caldwell at her desk, her presence as commanding as ever. "James, sit," she said, her tone warm but professional. I took a deep breath, launching into my pitch. I thanked her again for the presentation opportunity, then pivoted to my strategy. "I believe this plan can drive 20% growth next quarter," I said, citing data. She listened, her eyes sharp, interrupting only to ask pointed questions. I answered with confidence, drawing on every ounce of expertise. The demotion wasn't mentioned, but it hung in the air. I focused on the future, not the past. Her nods grew more frequent, and I sensed I was gaining ground. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a turning point. I had to make it count. Halfway through, Caldwell leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the desk. "James, your strategy is bold, but how do we ensure buy-in from the senior team?" Her question was sharp, probing, and I felt the weight of it. I paused, choosing my words carefully, then explained my plan for stakeholder alignment. I cited workshops I'd led, building consensus across departments. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded, jotting notes. I pushed forward, detailing how my strategy tied to the company's long-term goals. The demotion lingered in my mind, but I refused to let it shake me. I answered her follow-up questions with precision, drawing on data and experience. The room felt charged, like a courtroom where I was both lawyer and defendant. Caldwell's faint smile gave me hope. She was listening, really listening. I wrapped up my pitch, emphasizing execution. "This isn't just a plan, it's our edge," I said. She leaned back, her expression unreadable but engaged. This was my moment, and I'd seized it. Leaving Caldwell's office, I felt a mix of relief and adrenaline pumping through me. Her questions had been tough, but I'd held my ground, maybe even impressed her. Back at my desk, I replayed the conversation, analyzing every word. I'd avoided mentioning the demotion, focusing instead on the future. Hargrove's decision still stung, but Caldwell's interest was a lifeline. I opened my laptop, pulling up the org chart. My new role glared back, a step down. Yet her meeting had shifted something. I wasn't just the demoted manager anymore. I was the one with a vision. I started drafting follow-up notes, refining my strategy further. Colleagues passed by, some offering nods of respect. The office buzz felt different, like I was regaining my footing. I knew Hargrove was watching, but I didn't care. Caldwell's nod as I left her office was my focus now, a signal of possibility. The next few days were intense, with meetings piling up and rumors swirling faster. Word of my presentation had spread, and colleagues started seeking my advice again. Hargrove kept his distance, his face a mask of forced neutrality. I focused on the Q4 rollout, working closely with my team. They were energized, loyal despite the demotion, and their support fueled me. I heard whispers that Caldwell had praised my plan in a board meeting. The rumor mill was on my side for once, and I leaned into it. I refined the strategy, incorporating team feedback to make it airtight. Every email, every discussion, was a chance to prove my worth. The demotion had been a blow, but I was turning it into a comeback. Caldwell's interest was my leverage, and I wasn't letting it slip. I stayed late, poring over details, determined to make this work. A week later, Caldwell summoned me to her office, her tone brisk but warm. My heart raced as I sat down, unsure what was coming. "James, the board reviewed your strategy," she said, her eyes locking on mine. "They're impressed, and they want to move forward." I exhaled, relief flooding me. She continued, "You'll lead the implementation." The demotion wasn't mentioned, but her words felt like a reversal. I nodded, thanking her, my voice steady despite the thrill. "One more thing," she added as I stood. "Hargrove's transitioning out soon." My eyes widened, but I kept my composure. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. As I left, a wave of vindication hit me. The demotion had been a setback, but I'd turned it around. My strategy was now the company's path forward, and I was at the helm. Hargrove's exit was announced quietly, with a vague email about new opportunities. The office buzzed with speculation, but I stayed focused on the rollout. My team was all in, and we were hitting every milestone. Caldwell's weekly check-ins kept me sharp, her feedback pushing me to think bigger. "You're stepping up, James," she said once, her tone carrying weight. I nodded, keeping my gratitude measured. The demotion still lingered, a scar I couldn't ignore, but it was fading. I dove into the strategy, ensuring every detail was perfect. Early results were promising. Clients were responding, numbers climbing. My team's morale was sky high, and I felt their pride in our shared mission. Rumors swirled about leadership changes, my name among them. I brushed them off, but Caldwell's attention told me I was on her radar. The game was shifting, and I was ready to play. The rollout gained traction, with revenue ticking up and clients signing on fast. I met with Caldwell regularly, her questions now strategic, not just tactical. She was testing me, I could tell, but I was ready. One day, she asked me to present to the board again. "Show them your vision," she said. I spent days preparing, knowing this was bigger than Q4. The boardroom was daunting, their questions relentless, but I answered with confidence. My strategy wasn't just numbers, it was a roadmap for growth. I left the room exhausted but exhilarated. Caldwell's nod as I exited was subtle but clear. Colleagues started treating me differently, their respect no longer whispered. The demotion felt distant now, a hurdle I'd cleared. I was no longer just surviving, I was leading, and the board was starting to see it. Weeks later, Caldwell called me in again, her demeanor all business. "The board's approved your strategy for full rollout," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. I opened it, an org chart with my name as Director of Strategy. My heart leapt, but I kept my cool. "This is about your leadership, James," she said. "Not just the plan." I nodded, the weight of her trust settling in. The demotion was a memory now, overshadowed by this moment. I thanked her, my voice calm despite the surge of pride. As I left, I realized Hargrove's exit had opened a door, and I'd walked through it. My team, my strategy, my execution, they'd proven me. The corporate world was brutal, but I'd played it smart. I was back, stronger, and ready for the next challenge. The promotion was announced the next morning, and the office erupted in congratulations. Colleagues who'd once avoided me now sought my input. My team threw a small celebration, their loyalty unwavering. I thanked them, acknowledging their role in our success. The Q4 numbers were stellar, with clients raving and revenue soaring. Caldwell's trust was clear, but I knew I had to keep earning it. I started drafting a long-term plan, building on our momentum. The demotion had been a wake-up call. Nothing was guaranteed. I vowed to stay sharp, to keep pushing. The corporate ladder was treacherous, but I was climbing again. My office buzzed with energy, my team driving the company forward. I'd turned a setback into a triumph, and I wasn't stopping now. Months later, the company was thriving, my strategy at its heart. Board meetings became routine, with Caldwell often turning to me for insights. The demotion was rarely mentioned, a footnote in my rise. I thought back to that meeting, Hargrove's cold words, Caldwell's unexpected challenge. It had been a crucible, forging me into a leader. I mentored my team with the same fire I'd felt then, building a culture of trust. The company's stock climbed, and industry chatter called us a success story. I kept that old org chart on my desk, a reminder of the fall I'd overcome. Every challenge now felt like a chance to grow. I'd learned the corporate game, and I was playing to win. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning.